Hello, welcome back, everybody. SF Live episode 160. It's Thursday. It's Discovery Thursday. That means we present to you a company that is either very small in market cap, pre-discovery stage, or just generally unknown in the market. And I think we found a decent one today to introduce you to. It's Troubadour Resources Inc., and I'll be joined by Geoff Schellenberg in a few short seconds. He's president and one of the directors of the company. I'm quite excited to chat with him. And we're going to, of course, remind you that this is an interactive format. It's use hashtag AskTR, that's the company's ticker on the Venture Exchange, or use the YouTube chat for your questions if you're inclined to get anything out towards Geoff here as well. I'm sure we'll get to it and we'll answer those questions. But also, please be reminded to follow us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter. Make sure to turn on that bell notification as well, as we do all our interviews live. That way you do have an advantage over the replay crowd, we call them here, and you can get it firsthand directly from the CEO, as close as we can get to a live in-person experience. Now, let me switch over to Geoff. Geoff, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's great to introduce you to Discovery Thursday to our audience. I think you have an interesting little project, or a couple of interesting projects here in British Columbia, southern British Columbia. Can't wait to talk about it. But before we get started with some of the details, why don't you give us a quick 30, 60-second summary of Troubadour Resources?
Okay. Relatively new company. We listed in 2018. Tight share structure. We have two main assets, the Amarillo, which is an early stage copper porphyry target, and then the newly acquired Texas high-grade gold project, both in southern BC, located in and around one's southwest of Kelowna, one southeast of Kelowna, if you're familiar with the area.
Slightly. I've been to Kelowna only a couple times so far, but I know I need to go out there for some more wine tastings. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's known for.
Great. Since the number one reason or the number one criteria for investors looking at companies, of course, management. All right, so that's the number one checkbox everybody goes to look at. That's the first thing I go check when I go on a company's website. And I've noticed one thing, you're working together with your dad. And
that's correct.
Run us through a bit of the history. How did that come together? Who's Geoff Schellenberg actually?
Well, I was born into an exploration family, essentially. So my dad got into the business in the mid to late 80s, and that's around when I was born. So I grew up in an exploration household. My dad's a geologist by trade. I went a slightly different route. I ended up going through commerce at UBC. But I essentially just went straight to work for the family business growing up. So I've been in the business since birth, essentially. I know the ups and downs. So you get that inside feel for the business. You know what works and what doesn't. And working with my dad, it's some people might think it's difficult. Yeah, we do disagree from time to time, but we get along great. We have complementary traits that he sometimes talks me back from some crazy ideas, which is good. That's the experience he has. And it's an industry I'll be involved with forever, probably.
Young rebel.
Yeah.
No, it's great though. Your dad is more of the geologist. You're more, as you said, more on the commerce side. So that's quite complimentary. And that's why I'm assuming we're talking and I'm not interviewing your dad, right?
Yeah, he'd love to do the interviews too. But I do have quite a bit of technical knowledge on the geology side just from being around it. Just because I don't have that BSc in PGO doesn't mean I don't know what's going on. Within our group as well, we run a private services geological consulting company. So we do a lot of work for other juniors and mid-sized companies around Canada and worldwide. So there's a lot of technical knowledge here, and that's the basis of our background as well. We rely heavily on the technical side from the private consulting company.
That's interesting. That's a fact I didn't know beforehand. That is actually also a great segue because we like to talk shareholdership or capital structure before we dive into the projects as well. And close associates actually hold 25% of the company. Right, so those are investors that are actually technically savvy enough to know what is happening on the ground. And why don't you give us a bit more overview? Who are those close associates? And you mentioned you run a consultancy within your office there as well. So give us an overview there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the close associates are a lot of our geologists that we have on staff, as well as other individuals who run associated public companies within our group. And on the private services side, the company's called Coast Mountain Geological. So we do work for probably a lot of the companies you've had on your show. We manage the field programs for them and execute on their exploration plans. So we do see a lot of different projects and deal flow through the office. And we like to think we get pretty good at identifying potential in these projects and identifying possible acquisitions for the public companies within the group.
Interesting. And is that how the Texas acquisition came along? And I'm getting ahead of myself here. Is that something you saw through your group coming through, and you thought this is something you need to jump on?
It is, yeah. And there's just some special traits about the Texas project that definitely made it attractive. That we can touch on here in a little bit.
Exactly. Like, we're going to get to Texas. As I said, I got ahead of myself there, but I felt like that question needed to be asked. Let's finish capital structure real quick. Do you want to give us quick the cliff notes there on the cap structure?
Yeah, cap structure. So there's 35 million shares outstanding, little under 46 million fully diluted. Insider ownership's about 16%. And you add on top the 25% close associates ownership, so it takes you up to a little over 40% controlled and locked away quite securely. We did just complete a financing, $720,000 financing, which is enough to execute on our immediate exploration plans. We wanted to keep the financing somewhat limited just to maintain that tight share structure at this point in time, because we do feel there's probably going to be opportunities down the road to access additional capital at just more favorable valuations.
Sounds interesting. And did management insiders participate in that financing, or where did the money come from?
We participated a little bit. To be honest, our allocations kept on getting cut back just due to demand. We probably could have well oversubscribed the financing and raised well north of $1 million. But we decided we didn't need to at this point in time to execute on the initial, like you said, the initial exploration plans.
Yeah, from an investor point of view, the terms were actually quite attractive. 12 cents with a full warrant at 18. So
half warrant.
Oh, half warrant. Okay, 18. Perfect. The better then. Then it's not as attractive for investors.
Yeah, no, we had some comments about that, saying we were kind of a little bit cheap on the warrant side of things. But again, the demand was there. We didn't have to give a full warrant.
If you don't have to do that, and if the quality warrants it, don't do it. Like, I'm an investor. Of course, I want to see the full warrant. But from a company perspective, you don't want to issue a warrant. So half warrant is probably meeting in the middle there. So
yeah, definitely.
That makes sense. All right, I think we covered everything in the capital structure. Warrant exercise price at 18 cents. Options, I'm sure that's mostly management and insiders, like that have been awarded it. I think it's pretty clean. Like, there's not much to talk about. It's tight. I think we can wrap this up. Let's move on to the projects. So you raised money, and that's a good segue as well. So you raised $720,000. Like, what's the total cash position, working capital position right now?
Working cap's about $750,000 to $800,000 at this current point in time. We had kept the structure intact to fund the acquisition. We had about $250,000 come back on our mineral exploration tax credit from the government of BC. So that kept the lights on and allowed us to execute on the acquisition of this asset, the Texas Gold Project, and essentially fund around phase 1 of exploration last fall.
Great.
So we were able to do a lot with very little.
Okay. So $750,000 is still quite a little, actually. But what are the plans? How are you planning to spend that money?
The plan is to get the drill turning on the gold project in about a month's time. And the budget for that work is about $450,000, and we'll drill an initial 2,000 meters. For that. Drilling costs are relatively low in this part of BC. Everything's road accessible. Infrastructure is great. So comparative to, say, projects in northern BC or the Golden Triangle, we're a fraction of the drilling cost, which is why we don't need to raise a lot of money at this point in time. And we're able to execute on that 2,000 meters of drilling with more than adequately with the money we raised.
I was going to say that is quite cheap. That's what, top of my head, that's $200 a meter, but that includes essays and everything. That's all in.
That's everything. Yeah.
I think that's a great rate. Yeah, that's fantastic. So that makes a lot of sense. So
yeah. So like you say, southern BC is attractive just based on the infrastructure. You're able to do a lot with a little.
Yeah. And you mentioned Gold Project. Let's clarify that's the Texas project. Right.
Yeah, the Texas.
Yeah. So let's talk about Texas, because you only you acquired it in 2020, and we briefly touched on it. You saw it come through your office, of course. Like, what attracted you to it? What was that? Just like, okay, we got to have this.
The grade is what made us go wow initially. The vendor had taken a few samples on the property, and they came back close to 8 ounces per ton gold, which is incredible. And when you start looking at the Beaverdale camp itself, which is where the Texas project is located, the Beaverdale camp is historically known as a silver producer. It produced about 35 million ounces of silver, starting in the late 1890s, right through until about 1991, which is when the Highland Belle mine shut down. And the Highland Belle mine was the longest running producing silver mine in North America there for a bit. So there's a lot of history in the Beaverdale area itself. But what we're seeing on the Texas project is high-grade gold with great silver grades as well, and plus or minus some base metal credits as well. So that made us go, what is going on with this particular property that we're seeing these gold grades? And in the historic Beaverdale Highland Belle mine literature, there is reference to gold grades increasing at depth. So they started to see a little bit better gold grades, but nothing like what we're seeing initially on this project based on the historical information available and the exploration program we completed.
You mentioned historical information available. Like who was working on the project before, and what did you actually get when you acquired the project in terms of data?
There was very little data supplied when we acquired it. A lot of the data was available in the public domain through old assessment reports. And there's some turn of the century mining work as well. So you end up going back to the old news articles that reference some grades. For example, there's 2 tons taken out of the Midnight Group up to the north of the Texas property. That graded a little over 2 ounces per ton. That's referenced in the newspaper article. So you really have to dig back through and dig up this information. And in the 70s through the 90s, there was some trenching work done on this project. Especially in and around the Door, and that was trenched quite a bit. So there's extensive trenching up towards the cabin. That was, it appears to have been mined probably around the turn of the 1900s, and that was something that was rediscovered by the property vendor. And there is enough going on at that cabin location, which is about 300 meters north of the Dorn, that the old timers, they actually built a cabin and established themselves in that area, and the remnants of that old cabin are still there. And there's collapsed head frame and adit, so we don't know what they were mining there. But what happened when that head frame did collapse, it exposed probably a secondary vein there, and that's the one that graded about 18 grams per ton over 25 centimeters. So it's a smaller vein, but that probably wasn't what they were after. In the 1900s, half-ounce material probably wasn't enough for the old timers to go after. So there's a lot of work to be done in that area there, and then follow up on that.
So you're drilling. You're planning to drill. What are you like? How did you do your targeting? Like, or are you just exploring with a drill? I don't think you are, because I've seen some geophysics. So like how is the targeting work?
Yeah. So we completed extensive tightly spaced soil sampling, rock sampling, mapping, and a ground mag survey over the highest priority target area, which is the area between the Durin and the cabin. And what that outlined is a predominant north-south structure that our technical team believes that's what's controlling the mineralization. And we're also seeing secondary structures that cross-cut that. So where those 2 structures meet is where we're seeing the grade. So we're not exactly sure what's happening there, but those are the targets. We know there's grade there based on our sampling, and it's just figuring out exactly what those structures are doing and where the best grade and where that's going. So we will be drilling. There's geochem supporting information as well as the geophysics, and combine that with the samples we've taken on surface. It's a pretty compelling story to drill those targets.
And when do you expect to start drilling? Like, what's the seasonality? What does it look like on the ground? How much snow is there?
The snow is pretty much gone already. We had somebody up in the area last weekend just checking out access and what it was looking like. So we'll get going here in the coming weeks, month's time tops. We'll have the drill on the ground, and you can pretty much work in that area year round. Except maybe for when the spring breakup is in its peak, which is probably a couple weeks a year, where it just gets too muddy to access it. But right now, access is great, which all the planning's underway to get the rig on the ground and get going.
Fantastic. Have you secured any lap time so far, or like what's the discussion there?
The labs, we should be able to get our samples in before the rush of samples from northern BC. So we'll have regular sample dispatches to go into the lab probably by early to mid-May, right through the end of the program. So hopefully we're ahead of that rush. The labs are what they are. We can't really control. Realistically, I'd say it's probably a couple months turnaround. Maybe it's less, and that's a good surprise. But I think you got to take a realistic approach and don't overpromise and underdeliver.
And that's 2,000 meter program. Like, how are you dividing that? How deep do you have to drill? What's the plant depth?
All these targets are near surface, so the initial drill plan is probably not to exceed 150 to 200 meters in any drill hole. There's probably going to be some short holes, 75 meters. That's so you get a lot of holes out of this program, and we've secured a track mounted drill is what we're looking at putting on site. So the moves are going to be relatively easy. Once you're onto something, it's easy just to step out and just keep on drilling.
Interesting. Okay. And you're the first one drilling. Just to clarify, that those are the first holes ever going into the project, correct?
In this particular location, yeah. There was some drilling over on the Wombat, which is on the eastern side of the property. It was very limited. Again, a lot of trenching occurred up in that area. The property vendor had taken some samples up there. They came back about 1.5 ounces gold. So there's definitely some grade up there. The drilling that was completed, I believe, in the 90s up in that area returned anomalous numbers. They were narrow intersections of grade. So there's still a lot more to go and look at up there. It looks like the previous operators spent a lot of time trenching and not very much drilling, which that's the danger when you only have a very limited drill budget, say a few hundred meters. The risks of missing are quite high.
Well, you're trying to, like, what is it, HQs like this big? Like, you're trying to hit something, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, that's difficult. You have a 5-year drill permit in place, and you mentioned track mounted. That prompted another question. That's more social permit to operate. What does that look like in the area there?
There's overlapping First Nations interests, and we've been in pretty steady conversation with them, and making sure we're listening to their concerns. The town of Beaverdale itself, the property is located about 3 kilometers south. Beaverdale was established because of mining, so the community is quite pro resource development, and they're just in the conversations with our one person we had on site on the last weekend. Stopped and talked to quite a few of the locals, and they're all quite excited that some activity is going to be going on in the area. So yeah, things are all pointing in the right direction.
Okay, but you don't have any First Nations agreements in place yet. Is that something you're working on? Like, what's the goal for that?
There's no agreements in place at this time. It's a little bit early for that. That conversation is ongoing, and once we get further down the road with this asset, it's something that will be visited for sure.
Gotcha. Well, you bought Texas in 2020. You used to operate the Amarillo project before then, and so I got to ask you, like, why'd you feel the need to add a second project to the company?
We've always been on the lookout for additional assets. It's hard to be a junior exploration company with only one asset. You're kind of painted as only one asset. So if you don't have great success on that asset initially, it does affect people's opinions of the company. So having some optionality in a second quality asset, that's something we've been looking at for quite a while. And so we made the opportunity came up. We went after this project, and the option deal is quite an easy one. It's 100% over 2 years, essentially, 3 million shares and $80,000 in cash. And the property vendor, he's a friendly party with us. We've done business with him in the past. So those shares are in safe hands as well. Like, some people might think 3 million shares is quite a lot, but to put it in perspective, at the time we were trading at about 5 cents. Today we're at 15, 16 cents. So the valuation there, it made sense at the time.
No, and I was jokingly asking you before we went live here as well, like how well do you know the vendors? Like, how experienced is he or she in the capital markets as well? Because summer is coming up, so I don't want to be hit with 3 million shares because the gentleman or the woman might need a new boat for the summer, right? So,
Yeah.
and I don't want to be fighting that in the market, right?
Yeah, those shares are in safe hands, and we talked to the property vendor. We talked to him on a regular basis, so there won't be any issues there. And we've only made the initial payment on the property. The second payment will be due in January 2022. So he only has 1.5 million shares, so the boat wouldn't be too big anyways.
Okay, well, a little fishing vessel, you never know.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's briefly talk about the Amarillo Copper project as well. You put out some news the other day about it as well. It's not far from Kodiak Copper's MPD project, actually. It's a quite favorable area to be in. And let's talk about, give us the cliff notes on it, and what are you doing on it right now?
Okay, yeah, the Amarillo is located 35 kilometers just to the east of Kodiak's MPD and 10 kilometers south of the past-producing Brenda mine. So Brenda's the mine you see as you're driving from Vancouver to Kelowna. You're going down the big hill towards West Kelowna there. That's what you see on the right-hand side. That's Brenda. So just to give the viewers a bit of a geographical reference there. And we just completed an airborne VTEM mag survey over the entire claim group on the Amarillo. And based on the initial results we saw from that, we did pick up a little bit more ground. And what we saw in the initial data was in the direction that we were chasing this porphyry in the last drill program. We knew we needed to move to the southwest. And that's where we started to move the drill. And then, of course, budget constraints, they limit how much you can do. But we did see anomalous results in that last round of drilling in 2019. So we knew we were onto something. And this latest airborne data definitely supports that. And we're looking at a sizable anomaly that will need some follow-up work in the future here.
Gotcha. Let's sum it up here at this point. I think main focus obviously is Texas. You're drilling there. You're going to probably do some more field work at Amarillo at this point. Any other catalysts we're missing that we should be looking forward to for the next 3-6 months?
Those are the two main catalysts. Like you say, there's a lot of excitement around this Texas drill program. Just the chatter even around our office here. We haven't been this excited about a drill program in quite a while. So there's a lot of excitement and anticipation, and I think we're in for an exciting few months here.
Awesome. It's great timing to have you on, like April 1st. So let's hope it doesn't turn into an April Fool's joke. And
yeah,
no, but I'm quite excited to see that as well. So I'm quite excited for you to start drilling. So good luck with that. And thanks for coming on the program. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.
No, this was Geoff Schellenberg. He's actually president of Troubadour Resources. This was a Discovery Thursday episode 160 of SF Live. Make sure to follow us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, and don't forget to turn that bell notification on as well, as we do all our interviews live. That way you do have an advantage over our replay viewers, and make sure to use that to your advantage, of course. And that's it from our end. Happy Easter. It's a long weekend here. Markets are open on Monday, and we'll see you then. Thanks so much.